this traffic jam, dreaming of the green pastures I once ran.
Okay, so here we are. I'm Miles DeMott. I want to welcome you to the initial podcast episode of what will be an epic series of dialogue with interesting people, one of whom is Clark Lovelace, who, in addition to being a marginal doubles tennis partner, is involved with tourism here in Transylvania County. So thank you for joining us, Clark. It's wonderful to see you again in long pants, I might add.
I'm sorry for the listeners and viewers that they're not getting my best look, but we'll live with these khakis I have.
Yes, that's good. Other than living your best life, and enjoying a marginally successful career as a doubles tennis partner, what else do you do in Brevard?
Sure. Well, I'm a bit of a rarity in that I'm a local. So what I currently do in Brevard is I'm the director of the Transylvania County Tourism Development Authority, which is essentially the entity that markets, promotes, and preserves the tourism destination of Brevard and Transylvania County.
So let's say you're in an elevator in Chicago because you're on a trade show or something,
Sure.
or you're just there with your family, and somebody says, "Hey, what do you do?" and all that. What's your elevator pitch? What's your 30-second pitch about Brevard? Sure. How are you gonna sell that guy Brevard?
Yeah, rather than talking about me or what I do, I'd rather talk about the destination, and I would say I am from one of the greatest places on earth. Brevard in Transylvania County. It's known as Land of the Waterfalls. We have 250 in Transylvania County. All the outdoor activities you could possibly want to do, and it comes packaged in this authentic mountain community. I always say normally you need to either pick one of these two things, and we have both. Either I want to go somewhere where there's tons of stuff to do, or I want to go somewhere peaceful and quiet. We're that rare time where you can combine both. Doesn't have to be a big city with tons of stuff to do with horns honking and traffic, and it doesn't have to be a remote spot where you get peace and quiet, but you got to drive 30 minutes to get to anything.
So if somebody were to say, okay, that sounds lovely, what's Brevard about? So Transylvania County, which is the scope of your work, is the whole county.
Sure.
With lots of waterfalls and stuff like that. But if you're from here, you're local.
Sure.
So you're a bright guy. You could go anywhere and do anything. You've stayed here. Why is that?
Sure. I mean, I'd say Brevard's the heartbeat. We have a vibrant downtown. We have.
What makes that vibrant? What do you think of that?
Well, I'd say we only have about 8,000 people who live in Brevard. But when you look, everyone who lives here wants to live here. Sort of like you were alluding to me and me being here. The quick answer is because I want to. And that's true for folks that are either younger and working or folks that are retirees. This is where they've picked. So what that means is you usually then have like a high entrepreneurial spirit. So we have lots of mamas and pops. We don't have, these big chains here in Brevard. So you get a little eclectic mix, and sometimes eclectic means imperfect. That's fine. It's real. And so we have great places to eat, great places to enjoy a beverage, great art galleries and art studios, some, unique shops that you normally wouldn't find, all in this sort of authentic mountain setting.
Unpack authentic. I like the way you use that
Sure.
term, but I don't know. I mean, it's overused. So what's an analog that you would use for authentic that aptly describes Brevard?
Sure. To me, part of what authentic represents is it's not going to look exactly like you would want it to. It's not going to look exactly like you would construct it if you were starting from scratch. But it is
interesting way to put that.
It's a backwards way of getting at it, but it also just feels real while you're there. So to me, what it means with downtown is, you'll have. It's not like we have sections of town where, okay, this is the real estate district. This is where all of those are. This is the food district. You'll have a retail shop for like an outfitter's spot. Then you'll have a restaurant. Then you'll have a real estate office. Then you'll have the courthouse. Then you have a bookstore. Then you have an old movie theater. Then you'll have City Hall. again, it's not the way a city planner would plan it, but when you're walking it, there's not a moment where you're not just simply saying this has a history to it, and the people I'm coming across and the shop owners I'm meeting, they're not actors in a play, they're real.
So one of my favorite places in town, I've eaten there a couple of times, is the guy's name is Mike, who owns it. It's
Falls Landing.
Falls Landing. Okay, so I got into a great conversation with Mike when I first moved here, and he was telling me he was one of the first restaurants. He'd been there for like 25, 30, which I remember Brevard when the mills were still open and all that sort of stuff. So it was a very, very different town. So if you had to guesstimate length of service, what is the average length of service for a business in Brevard?
I would say, Mike is correct, and Mike's a good example. We don't have many fly-by-nights because normally this is someone who is, as I said, they're wanting to make this their home.
Yeah.
They're not just in it for, let me give it a shot and see what works. If anything, sometimes the starting point is I want to live here, and it's more of how can I figure out what kind of business I can make work and survive so I can be there. So, the list of 10, 20, 25 plus year businesses that we have is pretty long.
Yeah, compared to most.
Yeah. I do have a funny little story to tell you that Mike made me think about it because he's been in this business for so long. So when I was growing up, we were a partially dry county. So it meant no liquor by the drink. We had beer and wine in grocery stores, but no liquor by the drink. And we had a great place called O Susanna's. And like all other restaurants, there was no liquor by the drink. The gentleman who owns it, who happens to be John Taylor, who now owns O.P. Taylor's.
O.P. Taylor, yeah.
And he said he tried to get it changed, but he couldn't get it changed. So what he did was he acquired the building next to him, and he ran an old-time country store out of it. And he sold beer and wine in that old-time country store. And when you sat down at his restaurant, you got a menu to the restaurant, and then you got a menu from the place next door that said, we'll deliver to your table. So literally, they would, with a bottle opener, because they couldn't open it, would deliver it to your place. A couple years later, eventually the law changed, and you could serve liquor by the drink. But A, that was the bypass. B, that person doesn't own that business anymore, but he owns O.P. Taylor's, one of probably the more famous businesses that we have in Brevard. And you don't get weird stories like that in a manufactured today type of a place. Only, when you have, unique characters like him and people slowly becoming old timers like me that remember, way back in the 1980s.
So I think that's the way you describe that entrepreneurial spirit. I think I see it better now because it's more of, it's almost a MacGyver effect. You really just, whatever's going to make it work, you want to make it work because you want to be here, and everybody's got to pay Duke Power or whatever the power co-op is. So you got to pay your power bill. So you find a way to make it work, which I think is one of the more fascinating things about a town this size, but also a town in this part of the world, because, and this is the question I'm leading up to, in Brevard or in Transylvania County, what is, as far as revenues, I don't even know how, for the tax base, or I don't even know how you would quantify it, but what part of that is commercial, so it's just businesses in Brevard? Sure. And what part is tourism?
Sure. I'll answer indirectly, probably a little bit. You referenced earlier, we had two big employers, industrial employers when I was growing up. I think I'll start there if I can. So you had DuPont, which made film, and Acusta, which was Olin at the time, that made paper. At one point in time, believe it or not, those two businesses employed 75% of the workers in Transylvania County.
I believe it.
And I heard this stat. It was from a county commissioner, Mike Hawkins. And after he was giving a presentation, I was like, are you serious? He said, yep. This is a weird claim to fame, but in the late 1960s, if you smoked a cigarette in the United States, there was a 95% chance that paper came from Transylvania County, North Carolina. That's how much paper was being produced by Acusta. At one point in time, we had the highest fresh out of high school wage in the state of North Carolina. That changed slowly in the 80s and 90s, and then eventually in the year 2000, both of those places closed down within like an 18-month period of each other. And so it was a weird, strange, challenging time for our community. I was actually away. It was kind of my post-growing up years before coming back. But thank God for tourism. It wasn't necessarily the industry that this community picked or chose to hang its hat on. Mm-hmm. But if it wasn't for tourism, it probably would have looked like, I actually remember I worked at the Greenbrier in West Virginia, which is a great big resort. And a lot of those West Virginia towns, you can tell had a boom and they're in bust. And a lot of the downtown shops have broken out windows. And I think Brevard would have looked like that if it wasn't for the tourism industry. Thankfully, that kind of helped get us forward. We then have had some other things that we've discovered, like niche manufacturing. I don't think we're going to get a big manufacturer, but niche manufacturing, sometimes by people that were brought here because of tourism. Oscar Blues, the owner Dale, made his way here because of mountain biking. And when they were looking at an East Coast distributor, he said, make sure Brevard's on that list. If you heard of Sylvan Sport or Go Camper,
I love those stuff, yeah.
Tom Dempsey was a college student, an engineering student at Auburn University, came here rock climbing on spring break and said, someday I'm going to live there. That's why he brought Sylvan Sport here. So there's this connection between tourism and industry and commerce. Throw in that we have 4 other incredible breweries. A place with just 8,000 people is not supposed to have 5 breweries. But that goes back to your earlier question about what's authentic or what's a part of our culture. It's all kind of intertwined together. We do have, a number of like service-based industries because it serves visitors who come here. And we do have a decent amount of retirees because we are a desirable place to be. And so having a lot of those types of businesses, whether it's lawn care or things that visitors enjoy as well, like restaurants and retail, et cetera.
So that begs the question, which is an odd turn of phrase. Retirement versus young people. I've noticed that since the plants have closed, again, my outside looking in perspective, you're either, the audience, the group is either 20s and 30s with young families, or 70s and 80s and they're retired.
It seems weird.
There's very little in the middle, it seems.
There's some truth there. And I think part of it is, well, first of all, I'm a Gen X kid, so we're going to be the forgotten generation anytime the conversation comes up. Nobody cares about us, but I've heard it's because people are afraid of us. So
should we fear you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
If I've heard this, if there's an apocalypse, get behind the closest Gen X person you know.
Okay.
But I've heard that people like those two groups have a lot in common. People that are in their 60s, 65 plus, and in their 20s, actually, when they do surveys, have a lot of, they want hiking and biking paths. They want great outdoors. They care about having parks and open space. They want good places to go eat. They want breweries where they can bring their dogs. It's like, they're strange bedfellows to some degree.
Really are, and I had no idea that
weird
that
phrases
was true.
that I don't know where they come from. But it's actually, so it's not surprising when you see that. But there's a decent number of folks that are in the middle. A lot of folks like myself lived somewhere else, then experienced and learned, hey, that place I came from that I
not so bad.
Maybe I thought it was a little podunk when I was 14 years old. It's not so bad. And
cue the Peter Gabriel song. This is where we cue the Peter Gabriel song?
Yes, no, I am not too big time. I'm not too big time for Brevard. That is for sure. But I'm more of, standing out in front of Brevard, holding a boombox over my head, playing In Your Eyes,
You're in love, and her dad just won't let you do it. So anyway, so I was unaware of that sort of demographic analog for 20-somethings and 60-somethings. I think you're spot on. And it had never...
I read it somewhere, so whoever wrote it
had never occurred to me. So that clears up a lot. And one of the questions I was going to ask is there a path and this is a larger question, I think, than we maybe can consider, but is there a path to draw more in the middle and build Brevard out from the middle as opposed to the young families or the retirees? Yeah. Are we doing anything to bring whatever would draw them here? Because manufacturing may not do it, but there's got to be an economic incentive to draw that segment back.
That's a great question. In fact, I would list the struggle with that on our short list of things we need to figure out. So, for example, when I grew up in Glen Cannon, in this neighborhood in Brevard, and I didn't realize it at the time, but actually most of my neighbors were their parents. They had kids. Their parents worked at Acusta, and that was generating a lot of young people moving into our community.
And they were moving here for work.
This
was a relo spot.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really exist. So I do think we have a few things working in our favor. There's a term, solopreneurs, which are basically people who can live anywhere. It's being easier to work remotely these days. It helps on the visitor side as well. People can visit and still maybe get a little bit of work done.
Right.
Workcations, if I'm trying to throw off these,
you're good with them. Sling them like you know what you're doing.
So I was just at a meeting last night where we were all given little stickers, and it's about the future of Transylvania County, of Brevard and Transylvania County, and you had to pick your things, whether it's schools or economy or whatever the case may be. So there's certainly a lot of people who care about the future and care about making sure that it's the same special place that it is now, 5, 10, 20, 30 years. But I would say for sure on that list is, we've had a relatively stagnant population. A lot of people want to live here. More would live here. We need to have some desirable jobs for the folks in their 30s and 40s and generate some young families.
That seems to be a national issue. It's not just a Brevard issue, but it seems like if you guys are thoughtful about it, like you seem to be, you can solve that equation ahead of some other places and draw more people more quickly. Yeah,
I hope so. I mean, we're not, unfortunately, we suffer from a lot of the same issues that folks do naturally. And ironically, unfortunately, some of them, I'll be honest, we are even bigger issues here, affordable housing.
Oh my God, that was my next question.
It's an issue everywhere, but it's a bigger issue here. I say this to folks, and I hope this comes across in the slightly braggy sort of way that I want it to be, which is, I actually think we have just as many problems as most every other community that's out there. And some of them, we even have things that are sort of by our very nature, make it harder on us. Like with affordable housing, over 50% of our land is public land. So, that's invariably going to make that harder. But what I would say is, so I think that same issue of over 50% of our land is public land, that makes affordable housing even bigger issue for us, I think, in some ways. But the corollary is that's also part of why we're awesome. It's why we have 250 waterfalls. It's right. why we have,
surrounded by 1.5 acres of somebody else's tree farm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. So for us, I think it all boils down to part of why we're a special place is just because we have so much awesome stuff, and hopefully we can mitigate some of those challenges as we move forward and make it even better.
Well, the fun thing is, it's a national issue. I look at Brevard as a weird ecosystem because it's a nice, wonderful small town, but it's also to some extent a resort town because of the surroundings of the Western Plateau, all that sort of stuff, and it's a retirement community, and it's all these things. So you have like when I was looking for a house here. I look back 5 years, and this again is a national issue, but it's exacerbated in an area like Brevard because every house I looked at in the last 5 years had minimum doubled, and in most cases tripled in value in the last 5 years, just post-COVID. And that makes it really tough for young families to come in and all that, which, okay, so affordable housing is an issue. But also because this is a service-based economy to some extent with the retirees and all that. Another issue that Brevard faces, I think, that Cashiers faces, that Highlands is facing, is workforce housing.
Yeah.
And yes, we have 50% of the county is public land, but the other 50% of the county is NIMBY, which means not in my backyard. So that's a challenge, I think, because in a lot of these smaller communities, folks can't afford to live here, rent a place, or if you're waiting tables or whatever, it's cost prohibitive now, but it's going to get worse, which is going to diminish the experience in Brevard. So what are we looking at to fix some of that stuff?
Sure. I mean, I think you summed it up pretty well. It's a challenge. And like I said, that's the kind of exact type of stuff that we're trying to figure out, because it's part of what makes us special is that we are a desirable place. We have lots of incredible outdoor opportunities, but then that creates the challenge of a lot of service level jobs. And then in a community that has affordable housing issues, it's tough. And there is absolutely that not in my backyard, that NIMBY mentality. I mean, but it's everywhere. I remember I was a club manager in the Hilton Head area, and one of the members was saying to me, he's like, all these people, and I just, why can't they just, let us have our place? I was like, what? Didn't you move from Michigan 2 years ago?
Here, yeah.
He's like, yeah, I know, but I'm here now. I'm like, so there's just, I think it's human nature.
It is.
There's things we can't change, which is most of the things that are awesome about us. We have this incredible outdoors. We have this, authentic downtown. There's hopefully some of those other things that we can have some influence on. And, our city and our county are working together to try to create some housing that they always go to, can a teacher or a police officer afford it?
Yep.
And they're shooting for that type of stuff.
Yeah. So I want to come back to the tourism in the county and the city and all that sort of stuff. Walk me through, one of the reasons I moved here is because I like to bike, mountain bike, but also I like to bike. And the Acosta Trail is a draw. And I don't know where the Acosta Trail stands or when. So can you connect me with Transylvania County and Henderson County and whoever else is involved here, and where we stand and how we can keep that or get that ball rolling again or whatever?
Well, it's a well-timed question. At 2:00 today, I was at a work group meeting for the Acosta Trail. So, unfortunately, the answer's gray, not as black and white as I wish. The very long story short of that trail is when those two industries I mentioned, is specifically when Acosta shut down, a number of years later, that rail sort of went away. There was no industrial need for it. Our community for a while hoped that someone else big would come in, but then that didn't pan out. So then, of course, it was, well, what do you do with the trail? And there was a group that worked really hard. It's complicated, and I won't get into it, that was able to get it acquired, to have it rail banked. And then the city of Brevard stepped up on our side and said, okay, we will take ownership of the trail, which means trying to get the funding for it. So my organization, the Transylvania County Tourism Development Authority, said if you get a grant of $10,000 or $10 million or more, we will put in $1 million. So they eventually did. So we have pledged $1 million. We paid $250,000 of it. They actually ended up getting 2 grants. Unfortunately, they're at a bit of a standstill right now because the federal government is looking at any grants that have certain keywords in them, and hiking, biking infrastructure is on that list. So it's a bit of a question mark, but it's still, full steam ahead from the standpoint of, while that's happening, you don't just quit and you don't stop. Right. So there's other work that's being done. In fact, there's other planning work that technically there was another state grant that came in. There is, I'm sick of the word terminus. I don't know if you know what a terminus is, but it's your way of saying just a beginning or an ending of a trail, so you don't have to call it the beginning or the ending. We're dealing with the terminus and exactly where that is as it relates to downtown Brevard, the Estito Trail, which you probably know. So long story short, you have these 2 communities that are coming together. It is going to be awesome.
Yes.
It is going to connect essentially Main Street Brevard to Main Street Hendersonville. And then there's communities like Snowshoe that are in between. You can look at these other trails like over in Travelers Rest with the Swamp Rabbit Trail.
Is going to connect with it.
That's right.
It's
and
stunning.
so it's going to be, we invested because we saw it as a game changer for tourism, but I think it's also going to be a bit of a game changer for us locals who live here too.
Well, it's also, again, it's an economic development tool because it's like
Yeah.
a light rail line in Charlotte or the Belt Line in Atlanta. I mean, if you build it, people will develop across it, and that will draw more people. I mean, it's such an interesting tool and a way to repurpose a dead rail line in a way that will bring people by the droves. I mean, people will drive up here just to ride that trail.
It's going to be, you could probably come up with 3 or 4 different groups of folks. It's locals.
Yep.
It's people who live in adjacent counties
Yep.
that are sort of visitors, but aren't really long from far away visitors. And then there's people who are coming just targeted because of that. And then there's people who are coming because they hear we're a great place and discover it while they're here. So, and it checks off a lot of boxes for how folks can enjoy it.
So the authentic, let me circle back on something. The authentic, quaint, I don't know a better adjective.
I said awesome, but you don't have to use my word.
Oh, let's use that. So what makes it awesome? If you were looking at the constituent parts of what makes Brevard, Transylvania County, this area, other than the waterfalls, y'all do a great job of marketing those. What is it? And you've used some great words to describe it. What are those constituent parts? You've got the hiking and biking, the outdoors, the whole, Pisgah, everything else. What else that it's obviously a great place to raise kids, for example. So why? What is it that draws people here, and why did you come back, and why do you stay?
So I have, my daughters are 13 and 15, and so I'm certainly in that one of those categories you were talking about. I say this a lot, honestly, just because it's the truth. I sometimes appreciate Brevard the most when I am not in Brevard, because I am reminded of the stuff that we have that you don't have in those other places.
Right.
I'm not sure my car door is locked right now, and I am not worried about that in the slightest. Boy, there's not many places you can say that, right? I have the luxury.
What kind of car do you drive, by the way?
I'm not telling you.
Just thought we might just sneak out there. Yeah.
I have the luxury of sadly being a little bit of a type A personality. When 4 cars go in front of me, I'm like, ugh, traffic. Boy, do I appreciate how much of a joke it is to think that's traffic when I go to other communities. Even just, waiting in line and horns honking and all that other stuff. So to me, it's part of it is just what you don't find in other places, but you can find here. But then next on that list is, sure, but that doesn't count for much unless there's stuff to do. Well, we have a lot of stuff to do. Well, okay, but that matters. But I don't know, that only counts if you have like a culture that you're comfortable with. I love the fact that we are like exciting and cutting edge, but also just enough of traditional and Southern respectful sort of ways. I just think it's this weird connection of all of this stuff that you don't typically find when someone has come into the area and says, I'm thinking of moving there. Tell me about it, or what do you think? I usually try to talk to them about, what are you looking for? And sometimes it's exactly this, sometimes it isn't, and that's okay. I'm not trying to, we're a neat enough spot. I don't need to twist their arms. I just, we'll share with them what you can find here, and it seems to be to a lot of folks that's a desirable place to be.
Okay, so in my experience, you don't have much of a backhand. So, but that's just my experience.
No, but that's the truth.
But let's put a magic wand in that hand,
okay,
instead of a tennis racket, please, thank God. In full disclosure, I have no backhand, so your backhand was far better than mine. So there you go.
For the record, we lost in a third set tiebreak.
Yeah, we did.
So in the second set,
we hammered them.
We hammered them.
Oh my God, that was the moral victory right there.
There you go.
Anyway, so let's put a magic wand in that hand of yours.
Yep.
And what 3 things would you do to make this an even better place than it is?
Oh wow.
And it may help to consider what are 3 issues that are problems that exist, that you see them and we can fix them, but that may be separate from how you would make just an idealized wand wave and fix stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's not an easy question. It's probably easier to identify the issues more so than the solutions. But like a lot of things, they're very interrelated. I would say, to me, the affordable housing issue's got to be on that list. But also related to that is having more young people with families growing
in the tax base.
Growing that tax base. You can always think schools are a good example.
Yeah.
The schools have fewer graduates than they did when I graduated. Not by tons, but you have other markets. In fact, my brother-in-law is from Cary, North Carolina. When we were in elementary or middle school, Cary and Brevard were about the same size.
You got to be kidding me.
That is the tale of two. Absolutely.
Wow.
Cary was a small town, in the early
Right.
80s. So I would say, young families. And then third is protect the great stuff that we have. And we try to focus on that. I'm thankful to say that I think we have a great relationship with our land managers. We have a Leave It Better program, our version of Leave No Trace, where we've created the ways that folks need to make sure they're taking care of nature. We have a Be Waterfall Wise water safety campaign. So our philosophy is, while we're sending folks to play in these public lands, part of our job is also to make sure that they're here for future generations. So I would say we are doing considerable efforts, specifically even with my organization, on that third one. There are definitely efforts from an economic development standpoint. There's an organization, the Transylvania Economic Alliance, that is working diligently on
finding businesses and finding industry to bring it to town.
Yes, but even the step before that is finding the infrastructure or creating the infrastructure to draw those businesses. Sylvan Sport's a great example. They probably would have had to have left if not for the fact that the city and the county and this organization came together to create the space that they needed. So they're in space that is a long-term lease with the city of Brevard or with the county on land that was owned originally by the city. So, you had to have those entities working together. And then I'm not going to lie, the one I have no clue on how to solve is affordable housing. It's such a national issue.
Yeah.
We're doing things locally to try to make it better, but I fear that all those are going to be small things unless the bigger issue of income inequality and other related factors gets dealt with nationally.
Yeah, the devil on the other shoulder in that quandary is the fact that all of our houses are now worth more.
Yeah.
So we have to argue against that devil to be the better angels on this shoulder to say, well, yeah, in that small facet of this economy is booming because housing prices but you're eliminating what will ultimately make a community like this vibrant, which is young people. They can't come in, and your teachers, your firemen, you've got to accommodate them economically, or they go somewhere else.
Yep.
And that's, in my experience, is what will make or break a community.
Yeah, and I think we've held it off, and we're fighting to keep doing so. But I do hope that, again, I think regionally, at the state level, at the national level, we have some changes that make it better.
Is Rossman in Transylvania County?
Yep.
And I understand there's a development down there that's, I don't know how many rooftops, but apparently over the next 10 years, there will be a number of rooftops popping up in the Rossman area. So does that help?
It all helps. Yeah. I mean, there's something, there is a private development in the Lake Toxaway area, which is a little past Rossman. There then is a county effort with some land in the Rossman area. There's then the city of Brevard is working on something in the Brevard area. So it all adds up. I'll tell you a funny tidbit from growing up here with you mentioning Rossman. Because folks will ask me what it was like, and well, you're in Western North Carolina. Is that sort of like Asheville? And I'm like, well, I don't know, because when my high school, the Brevard Blue Devils, when we played Rossman, we were the preppies coming to town. And when we played Asheville schools, we were the rednecks coming to town. And so I was like, I'm trying to figure out which one were we? And the honest answer is probably a little bit of both, but it just shows you how relative it is. Yeah. But we have a number of communities. Rossman's a really special community. Speaking of sports, their football field is in the middle of their community and is such a part of that community. Headwaters of the French Broad River. It's a really special community. The Lake Toxaway area, which is a pretty rural area, but then also has Lake Toxaway Estates, which is a private community that has some really nice homes, a beautiful private lake. Cedar Mountain is a unique community that was nothing when I was growing up from a standpoint of like businesses, and now it's got a bunch of really cool businesses. So we're growing in our way, in our own way, but we still need to have that bigger, more strategic growth as we look to the future.
Okay, so what I call the Gulch, which is that's the hotel site on
Yes,
on
okay. All
is that Broad?
Yes.
That's just the Gulch. And I was keeping up with that because I think it's a great opportunity to alleviate some of the parking issues downtown. It would be a great mixed-use development. There's a great spot for a hotel. All these things that I think were part of the plan.
Yes.
Where do we stand on that?
So first of all, I'll agree with everything you said. I think that would be great. I think, unfortunately, timing was problematic in terms of
On the first iteration.
That's
Yeah.
right. When the original investors came in, the last I heard, which is, I mean, golly, it's probably at least 6 months, maybe as much as a year ago. The principal group is still looking to make the project work. Still planning to make the project work. Things have changed, whether it's the price of construction, the price of borrowing money, all those factors that come into play that have made the original plan not work. But every time you ask, we plan on doing this, is the answer you hear. And I do think it would be a bit of a game changer.
Yeah.
One of the few things that I would say is on our what we're missing from a local and visitor standpoint is downtown Brevard shuts down at 8:00. There's nothing.
8:30 on the weekends. Now
there
give
you go.
yourself a
All
little
right,
bit.
party at 8:30.
Yeah.
And that changes when you have the location that you're talking about.
Yeah.
That hotel is 2 blocks away from downtown,
Right.
and so that totally changes that. If not for that, you do have some fun spots. Actually, the lumberyard where we are now
Yeah.
is more lively post 8:00 at night than downtown Brevard. But I think that would be a difference maker, the same way the Acoustic Trail is. So there are things on the horizon either that are definitely happening or that are probably happening or that are maybe even somewhere in the works. But that's one of them for sure. City Camper, by the way, is the name of
City Camper, yeah. I used to see they've taken all the fencing and all the banners and all that stuff down. So yeah, I just think that was a neat project.
Oh, I'm stuck here in this traffic jam, dreaming of the green pastures I once ran. The road ahead's a snail's slow dance. This highway's robbed me of my chance.